from here, and some homes have been damaged and whatnot. But I think for the most part, a lot of people were very well protected and spared. I hadn't heard anybody that was injured or anything like that. Material things can be replaced, but my heart goes out to them because their life has been turned upside down. And it is a challenge, but I'm thankful at the same time with that. So I encourage you to be careful going home. Right down the road here tonight, I bet you there was at least 6, 7 deer right beside the road, and they're still out, and they hadn't killed them all. I wish they would, but they're still running around. So just be careful, if you will. Philippians chapter 2, I'll begin reading in verse 14 tonight. Read just a few verses and take just a moment to introduce a message tonight. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 14. Do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. I'm just going to read those particular verses tonight. Draw your attention to one aspect of it. Of course, we have the first part, do all things without murmurings and disputings. I'll say a little bit about that. That you may be blameless and harmless. That's two different things. And then also that your light, you shine as lights in the world. You shine as lights in the world with that. Darkness this time of year comes early to me. We're very close to having the shortest day of the year. It gets dark earlier, and then the days start stretching out a little bit. I believe the first day of winter is considered the shortest day, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's about December the 21st with that. But these dark nights, darkness comes early. And when light comes on the scene, darkness flees. A principle associated with light and darkness. We know that the Christian is the light of the world in a sense, with the salt of the earth, if you want to look at it in that way. But the light of the world, the light shines brightest in the darkest of the dark. And folks, we are in what I believe a crooked and perverse nation. We are in a very much so crooked and perverse nation. It's only gotten worse over time, and I believe it will continue to get worse. It amazes me just how bad a nation we have, if you will, or crooked and perverse nation that we really have. I never cease to be amazed at things. Just the wickedness that's in this world, and how people plan and plot to do harm, and especially this time of year. And I encourage you, as you're out and about, this time of year is a challenge for a lot of folks. If you're going somewhere, I wouldn't encourage going alone. I'd be careful in where you go and who's around you. Be observant with that. If you feel uncomfortable, be sure to let someone know with that. But light. I have got to the point in life that my eyesight is not as good as I would like for it to be. And we do some work there in the shop. One of the first things that I used to grab was some tools to work with. Now the first thing I grab is some type of light so I can see with that. And it's frustrating because wherever I put that light at, it doesn't work too well. I have to line up just right. And if I have somebody else holding it, one of the things that really, I getting somebody to hold the light in the right place. If you're standing on this side and you're holding the light, and the person's standing on this side and they're looking this way and they hold that light, you can't see a thing. I mean, you got to have the light in the right place, shining in the right direction. And so my father taught me this. I've never forgotten it. And he said, when I give you a light and I want you to shine that light for me, I want you standing by my right shoulder pointing it away. And when I turn my head, I want that light to follow me. That's how he taught me to hold the light. And I understand it with that. So later on in life, I bought one of these things you put on your head. Put a strap with a light on it like that right there, and you put it up there. But there's only one problem with that. Every time I go to get it and go to use it, it seems like the battery don't want to work. And so I have to get batteries and put in it. But that work. I mean, if everything, you get the battery in it and you get the light there and so forth, it works pretty good. But a light's got to be directed. A light has to have a source of energy. A light has to have a source of energy. We're to be a light in this world. We're to let our light shine with that. There's two aspects prior to we getting to the light. The first one deals in that particular verse in Philippians chapter 2. Go back to verse 14. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. That's one point. The next thing, that you may be blameless and harmless. That's another point. And then the light. Now, when we get to the light, that's where I really want to get to tonight. But murmuring and disputings. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. Let's talk about that in church. Murmuring and disputings. What is murmuring? Complaining. Disputings is disagreement with that. You would think that folks in church, we all ought to get along. I'm going to say that again. You know, you would think folks in the church would get along. There wouldn't be any murmurings and disputings with that. And if you're listening online tonight, I invite you to come. And if you want to come complain, we have a complaint department. T.J. Ambrose is in charge of that. You see him, and he'll take care of your complaint. He'll file it in file 13, and we'll be all good to go. It'll be on record with that. But, you know, this world doesn't need any Christians that are just going to keep complaining. Amen? You just might as well quit with that. Now, I'm like you. I'm human. I get so disgusted sometimes but it doesn't do me any good to start complaining. Not one bit. It just gets me worked up. And it just builds and builds and builds with that. But it says do all things without murmurings and disputings with that. Don't complain, don't dispute about it. Do all things. Now, you say, well, wait a minute. Now, what if I really got a legitimate gripe? There's a way to handle it. There's a way to handle it and voice your concern and go on with life. Amen? But most of the time people complain just simply because they don't get their way. Now, sometimes, again, the world we live in really pushes that button where you feel like people are taking advantage of you. Just simply because they're not doing their job. And that's aggravating with that. I know I'm online and everything, but I called and ordered something for the church. And this online ordering stuff is different than in person. You know, you see a picture or something, and it ain't all above board. So anyway, I ordered something, and I made a statement just a week or so ago. When we have communion this time, we're going to have gluten-free bread. Well, the package came at what I ordered. I ordered something from a company. The package came, and Brother Milton got it, and he opened it up and looked at it. I had opened it, and he looked in it, and he said, I don't think this is something right. He said, them packages, it ain't nothing in. And so he went and got it. I saw it. It didn't register to me what it was. And so anyway, we looked at it, and it was not right. So I called the company, and I said, listen, I'm not calling complaining. I said, but we ordered this, and this is what we got. And anyway, to make a long story short, they're making it right. They're sending something else. But, you know, there's a way to handle it. There's a way to handle it. That's all I'm going to say. With that, and I done made up my mind when I told them what we had and it wasn't what I wanted, and if they just said, well, you're stuck with it, then that was fine. If somebody wanted to do that, it wasn't enough to get upset over. But here's what I told her. I said, the thing about it is this: I ordered it from you. I said I could have gone just a few minutes from my house and picked it up somewhere, And I paid you more for it than what I would have paid for it here. I did it. I don't really know why I did it, but I said I won't do it again. And anyway, to make a long story short, they're sending something else. Maybe I'll get it. I hope I get it. I'm planning on getting it, and go from there with that. But complaining, complaining. Most of the time, people complain when they don't get what they want. They don't get their way. Complaining and disputing. That's two different things. Notice what else it talks about. That you may be blameless and harmless. That you may be blameless and harmless. Blameless and harmless. With that. Blameless is being free from fault. That we're to be blameless, free from fault. Harmless is a different meaning. Harmless is a different story. You understand blameless that we're guilty to start with, but it's through the shed blood of Christ we're not. That blame is not cast upon us with that. So in that sense, we're without fault because of the shed blood of Christ. But the harmless, harmless. Now I want to ask you a very, very personal question: is a snake a harmless animal? No. A snake is a very harmful animal. You say, why is that? Well, that snake may not have intentions of doing anything wrong, but he going to cause me to hurt myself. That's right. I mean, to me, that you get it. Blameless and harmless. Harmless has to do with not causing any harm, right? And I've met people that I thought were very harmful, and they had the ability to be harmful. But that's not a Christian's trait. Blameless and harmless with that. In other words, if you can't help somebody, don't hurt them. I mean, they already hurt enough. They don't need you to jump on their bandwagon with that either. All right, that's the two aspects of it. But the focus of tonight's message is still yet to come. It says that we're in a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. Lights in the world. It's amazing to me that through the years there are different messages that stand out that I have preached. One of them that I preached, it's been a very, very long time ago. I doubt very seriously I've preached it more than a couple of times through the years, and each time I've added things to it with that. But one of them that stands out is a message that I titled The Old Lamp Lighter. The Old Lamp Lighter. See, we're used to electric lights, but in the old days when they didn't have electric lights, they had an individual that would be a lamp lighter. He lit the lights in the street. They would burn off of some type of fuel. It's his job to fuel that lamp or that light up, the street lights up and light them. And you could see him going down the street one by one as the light came on with that. It's a pretty picture and painted in your mind as somebody that's lighting the lamps. And part of his job was when you lit that lamp, because it burned with some type of oil, and at that time I think it had to do with it burnt, they used whale blubber, whale oil or something along those lines. But that lantern, when it was lit, sometimes would smoke up. And you know, if you've seen a lamp, an old-timey lamp that you light, when you first light it, it smokes up, and you have to clean the lens. That was part of his job, but the old lamp lighter. And you know what? We need to be lighting some lamps so the light shines with that. We're used to our lights in the way that we are. We would agree that it's important for us to let our light shine. However, many Christians, their light burns very dim, very dim. I have noticed this, and that is lights today on vehicles seem a whole lot brighter on certain vehicles with that. And it seems like to me the newer the vehicle, the brighter the light with it. I have a 1990 Chevrolet pickup truck. It doesn't have many miles on it. It was my grandfather's, and I have it there. But the lights on that pickup truck are so dim, and I have cleaned the lenses. I have done everything in the world, but you know what I have to do? I have to change the bulbs. I have to put a new style bulb in it so that those lights would be bright enough today to be equivalent. But it's just amazing how dim they are, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's progression with the lights. The lights today are much brighter. Most of you have some type of flashlight with you if you have your phone with that. It's a little app on it that you can pull up a light, and it's a pretty bright light with that. And when somebody shines that light in the wrong place, it doesn't help you at all concerning it. But how do you let your light shine? That's the bottom line. You got to have a source. Our source is the Holy Spirit. You got to have a bulb that burns like it should with that. To me, that's salvation. It's not a bulb that burns out. It's got to get connected. It's got to be cut on. All of these things. And it's got to point in the right direction. We could go on and on about letting your light shine, but how do you really let your light shine? This year at Christmas, you're starting to see lights pop up all over everything, and it's just a pretty sight. I've been by some houses that have the yard lights out, that shine up on it, and it's a pretty picture with that. But letting your light shine, folks, we need to get it down that a Christian's light is to shine in a dark world. Folks, we're to let others see Christ in us, on us, around us, about us, and all through us with that. Everywhere there's a light that shines, there's a shadow that's cast. And we could go on and on about it. So here's an acrostic about letting your light shine. Real simple. An acrostic that spells out shine. Shine. By the way, went to Snow Hill at a pastor church. Do y'all know where Snow Hill is? It's just on the other side of Shine. Shine is a little community. And guess why it's named Shine? Moonshine has nothing to do with about a bright light shining with that. So you're in the eastern North Carolina, the word shine means different things. And so I want to make sure that you understand we're not to make moonshine for the Christian cause. Would you ever thought somebody would have to say something like that in church with that? But we're to let our light shine. Number one, the first for shine, S, seek to keep your relationship with the Lord your highest priority. For shine, letting your light shine. Seek to keep your relationship with the Lord your highest priority. How can you faithfully share Christ with others if your relationship with Him is weak? Let it be the utmost important thing in your life is your relationship with the Lord. Your relationship with the Lord. I've told you about an evangelist. Some of you may know him and remember him. His name was Jimmy Clark. Jimmy Clark traveled around, and he ended up starting a children's home, and just an amazing thing. But Jimmy Clark was a rip, snorting, raring preacher in his day. And a few years went by, and he had aged a little bit, and I hadn't seen him. And I had him come preach, and I talked with him a little bit on the phone, and I could tell some things were a little bit different with him. And he had kind of mellowed out in the years, but I want to tell you what he said that really registered to me. He went from a preacher that preached against women wearing pants. He went from a preacher, a man that preached on the television, the wrongs of TV. He in his day now, he changed. You say, what happened? Did he compromise? I don't think he did. I think he realized this. As a matter of fact, he said it. He said, I have come to the conclusion in my life, the most important thing for me is my relationship with God. He said, I'm not put in this world to correct everybody. I'm put in this world to serve God. He said, my relationship with Him is the most important. He said, you can be wrong as wrong can be. He said, but if my relationship isn't right with God, I have no business correcting you. Folks, you got to understand that's a tremendous statement. His priority was his relationship with God Almighty. He said, I will be more effective in ministry by the closer I am with God. That is so true. So true for all of us. You'll be more effective for God by your walk with God. And you say, what do you mean? I'm talking about when you get up tomorrow, you set out purposely to walk just as close as you can with God. And then when you get in that store and somebody acts a fool, you'll hold your mouth. As a matter of fact, you don't have to give somebody a piece of your mind. And some people need to hold on to all their mind they can because they don't have much to be sharing. You understand what I'm saying? Seek to keep your relationship with the Lord your highest priority. Stay close. Stay excited about the Lord. Allow Him to flow through you because of your closeness to Him. I'm sure you've seen the difference in a battery. You have a regular AA and a AAA, and then you got all these little flat batteries, and everything's different and all that stuff. But a 9-volt battery is still different. You know what's different about a 9-volt battery than any other battery? The positive and negative on the same end. And if you know what you can do, and I've known them to do it, to make a sales pitch with, you can take a piece of steel wool on a 9-volt battery and cross it out on the positive and negative, and you get it just right there, and it'll heat up a little bit. It's got to make connection. It's got to make connection between the positive and the negative. Your closeness with God it's got to be that connection. That connection. Keep it a priority. Seek to keep that relationship. That's the first one. Next is humbly yield your life to the Lord on a daily basis. Remember, we're spelling out the word shine. First, S, seek to keep your relationship with the Lord the highest priority. Second, H, humbly yield your life to the Lord on a daily basis. We have to consistently yield to God's will in our life. Folks, you don't know what's best. I don't know what's best, but I know God that does know what's best. And folks, if I stay close to Him, He'll tell me, and then it's my responsibility to yield to what He tells me to do. Even if it goes against some thoughts and things that I want to do, I have to stay yielded to Him. One of our desire, or His desires for our lives to be, is encouraging witness and sharing the gospel. And if we humbly yield to Him, He'll bring someone in our path to share the gospel with. We need to die to our desires. By the way, what we read in Philippians chapter 2 is written by Paul. Paul's writing to be an encouragement. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. Paul had reason to complain. Paul had reason to gripe. That you may be blameless and harmless. The blameless and harmless, Paul wasn't at fault. He was put in prison for preaching the gospel. But how's he going to let his light shine in prison? He had limitations to what he had to deal with. He had to humbly yield himself to God's will for him. Could you imagine Paul having to come to the conclusion, this is God's will for me to be locked up in prison for preaching the gospel? And to take a positive approach for it. Seek to keep your relationship with the Lord as your highest priority. Humbly yield your life to the Lord on a daily basis. The I. Initiate relationships for the purpose of sharing Christ. For letting your light shine, the I. Initiate relationships for sharing Christ. In other words, when you come in contact with folks, when you befriend people, when you start talking to them, you have one purpose in mind, and that is to make sure they know you're a Christian, and they make sure that you make sure they know the Lord's coming back, and if they're not prepared, they're going to spend an awful place in a place called hell. You know that's the reason we're on this earth, is to tell others. Tell others the good news, yes. But tell others that if they die without Christ, they're going to spend eternity in hell. You know what? We've come to a point in time where in our life, we meet people, we talk with people, we could talk about anything and everything. But all of a sudden, it seems like when you start talking about the Bible, when you start talking about Jesus, it's almost like people take offense to it. Folks, just because someone gets offended that you mention Jesus does not mean to stop talking about Jesus. I mean, you do it in the right way. Folks, that's why we're here. You initiate the conversation. We could talk, look, you could talk about anything and everything in the world, but folks, when you leave out the door, if you hadn't talked about Jesus, you failed. That's our priority. That's our purpose with being here. That relationship is for the purpose of sharing Christ with it. We can establish new relationships and meet new people. And folks, our world has gone backwards. We've become a very impersonal society. We've put social distancing was already here before it ever came about because of COVID. We had put barriers between us and other people. I remember when COVID came about and that man went in the store and he had built, I want to say, a big donut. And he was in the middle of that donut and he had a big balloon thing around him, a 6-foot distance, you know. And if you remember, I actually brought a 6-foot piece of PVC pipe and held it out and I said, this is 6 foot. But could you imagine going in a store with that much distance, really? I mean, let's face it, you couldn't even fit through the door back there. You have to turn up sideways to come in. We have built so much distance between us and other people now. Not just because of COVID, but prior to that, as I said, we don't want people in our personal space. And I'm not talking about it in breathing distance and that kind of thing. I'm talking about you believe that way, I believe this way. You stay over there, I stay over here. That's a mindset, folks. But that's not an excuse for us not to share the gospel. We need to initiate that conversation. And if they tell you, I'm not interested, just look at them and say, I wish you were, but if you ever are, I'll be glad to talk to you. You know, if they put the barriers up, you just remember you got to keep that individual in prayer. Spelling out the word shine. Number 1, seek to keep your relationship with the highest priority. Number 2, the humbly yield your life to the Lord on a daily basis. The I, initiate a relationship for the purpose of sharing Christ. N, S-H-I-N, never give up. Basketball just had the Jimmy V Classic. I will say this about Jim Valvano. He was a great motivator. Spiritually, I'm not even going to comment on that aspect of it. But he faced a battle with cancer and said, never give up. And it's still, those words are still heard. How quick we are to give up on people. You remember God was patient with you. How quick we are. Folks, if you share the gospel with somebody one time and they don't get saved, a lot of people never go back and mention it again. And then if they share it a couple times and they don't get saved, and it doesn't seem like it registers, we just give up on them. Never give up. Never give up. God hadn't given up. You say, well, he turned some over to a reprobate mind. I agree with that. But I don't know whose those are. That's not my business. My business is to share the gospel. If they run me out of town, share the gospel. But never give up. Never give up. Folks, I'm not going to give up on his return. I honestly believe, this is probably the first time I've ever said it in a public forum like this. I've probably thought it before. But I honestly believe the Lord's going to come back in my lifetime. I really do. You say, why is that? I just see things in a different light today than I did when I was 40, 50 years old. The world, folks, the world is gone. I wasn't a preacher of doom and gloom. I was a preacher of hope and prosperity, and the Lord could turn back. But I'm telling you, it's hard to preach that today. Folks have just turned so far, so far. Never give up, though. Never give up. Never give up. People need time to digest what you're telling them. People aren't always as agreeable as you and I are. Right? And then the E. Shine. S-H-I-N-E. The E. Encourage yourself by being obedient. Encourage yourself by being obedient. Some people need more encouragement than others. And it's always good when people do things and somebody notices it and you say, well, you did well. You did well. I didn't grow up like that. My father was not that way. My father never gave me praise for doing what was expected. He didn't do it. I meant, if I did something good, it was like, you ought to do it every time. I mean, it was expected. It was expected. And that was my father and how he raised me. And that has a lot to do with Katie and Camille. But some people want more praise than others. Some people need more encouragement than others with that. And, you know, the best cheerleader you can have is yourself. The best cheerleader you can have is yourself. Folks, if you're dependent on somebody else looking at you and patting you on the back, you better figure out some way to do different. Folks, if your relationship isn't with the Lord strong enough to know that you're doing right, you better check up on that. But encourage yourself. We get discouraged in a lot of areas. Discouragement comes and we're less eager to share the gospel. But folks, just know this. God told you to do it, and it ought to be satisfactory if you're doing what he tells you to do. We want to count the numbers. Oh, yeah. I witnessed to 10 people. I shared the gospel with this one. This one got saved. That's good. But, folks, I'm here to tell you, God said do it. The fact that you do it ought to be satisfactory. It ought to be what you ought to do. That's encouraging yourself, knowing that God said do it, and that's what I'm going to do with that. But we want to base it on the fruit that comes our way. And folks, I'm here to tell you, if I raised a bushel of apples and I brought them to church to show them off, that ain't the purpose for raising apples. That's putting self in the equation. You take a bushel of apples, you raise them and give them away and don't tell anybody where they come from. That's a whole lot more satisfactory. That's a whole lot more encouraging with that. Amen? Encourage yourself with being obedient and sharing the gospel. Shine, S-H-I-N-E. Let your light shine. Would you agree with me that in a dark world we need our light to shine bright? And you can let your light shine bright. Let me tell you how. Well, I done told you one time, so I'll tell you again. The best way that I know of to let your light shine bright is, first thing, mine don't want to do right now. Where did he go? I cannot believe this. Well, there's another way to do this thing. That's a bright little light, isn't it? You know, take that light, shine it in the right direction. And shine it where it's beneficial. And let others see the light that's in you. Folks, too many times, I've done this before. I've taken my phone out, cut my light on, look out there. That doesn't do good. How many of you ever been driving down the road and somebody had the bright lights coming at you? What do? Flash them, flash them, flash them. Why do you do that? Get their attention, right? Payback. Thank you, TJ. Thank you. Everybody else is coming to the altar. TJ standing back there saying, I answered honest. You know what, coming to church tonight, you know what got behind me? A car that had one headlight. And he had that on bright. And when he hit the switch, that both went out. So he could only have one headlight. It aggravated me to death. And I thought about the message the whole way down here. He's letting his light shine bright right in my back door. Let your light shine bright for the Lord this Christmas season. You'll be blessed for it. Heads bowed, eyes closed. We're going to close with a word of prayer tonight. Thank you for joining us at Riverside Baptist Church. But, you know, I don't care if you're lost, there's not a bright light in you to shine. If you're saved, you've got the light, but you may have a dirty lens that needs to be cleaned. You're connected. All aspects of it. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe there's some here tonight that you want to pray and say, Lord, let my light shine bright for you during this Christmas season. And you'll find that in the next few days, there'll be an opportunity for your light to shine bright. Is your relationship with the Lord what it ought to be? Let your light shine bright. I'm going to ask Brother Philip Wood if he'll dismiss us